Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here to say that I had the nerve to watch the movie Nerve. So, if you want to go out of your way to see this movie for the first time because pimping ain't easy, go out of your way to say that you've seen this film on two different apps that I dare in fact use fairly reliably, and you can say that you've seen this film without going into a certain specific kind of app that would probably dare in fact want a subscription out of you or a free trial or whatever the heck that it usually does. So, with that said, do you have the nerve? Because I sure as heck do. So, going into this movie, you could go into two apps. You can go and see this movie on a app called the letter C Movies, or just C Movies. Excuse me, and you can be able to see this movie for the very first time, or you can go on to Fox HD Movies app where the logo will say so, but the app won't be like 1080p movies. You're probably able to see it through there. So dare in fact go through these apps to watch Nerve for the very first time if you haven't, or if you have and you remember this movie, thank God, because I hope someone does. So, going into this film, I did really enjoy this movie. I really like how this comes to be kind of movies that I've seen in the past, like 13 Sins, or just kind of one of those things where you're thinking like, oh yeah, like this won't affect my whole entire life. Speaking of which, I have seen a movie called I Lived, or I Live. I think it's called I Lived, and like this kind of feels like the same ballparking thing of this. Plus, also there's stuff like App 2013, like a movie that's just called App. That eventually you could also see that's like cheaply done, but similar to this. So, anyways, going into this movie, I did actually really enjoy this movie. It is a real fun adventure of a film. The thing of it is we kind of get like a scattered batch of like random people through times of this movie where they just tend to focus on whichever. Like it's not always focused on both V and Ian. But it seems like we only get the real true backstory of V and Ian, with the exclusion of some stuff with Sydney, because it seems like she is tied to V. She's technically her best friend. So in the end, I would have liked for us to like just kind of really invest in a number of people in this movie, and it seemed like we had to invest in a very small few. Like even in movies like Death Race, where we have like a bunch of people kind of all like jockeying for position in that movie, like we do kind of get like a full on like understanding of who everyone is, like who is exactly playing this game. And I liked that a little bit better than this because all we care about is just two people and that's it. Like we don't get like a quick profile done or whatever of like, oh, well, this is the top 10 and this is all who they are. They could have had some like news reporter schlub come in and give you like a recapping or something of any part of this movie at any point in time. There is also this movie called Funhouse that I think is the 2019 movie called Funhouse that people could probably see, where eventually you have like this is very kind of similar, but they're all kind of stuck into one house. It's kind of like Big Brother meets like you're probably gonna die soon kind of a film. But you have these like the whole theme of it is like a bizarre panda, and like the guards have these panda masks, and so go and check it out. It's a movie called Funhouse. You probably won't be able to easily be able to find it anywhere, but I've seen it, so go ahead and check it out. So, what is the teeing up part of this movie? So, what ends up happening is we have a girl named Sydney who is to be on the top rung of this game called Nerve. Like, this also kind of reminds me a little bit of Guns Akimbo, but we're trying to get it yeah. So, good God, too much to compare, but it's easily that I know way too much freaking films. So, Sydney is to be on the upper echelons of this game, and it seems that eventually we have Sydney who is just pushing a lot of her friends to be the watchers of this, so that way, like, she can be able to get either more viewers or be able to just get more heavily popular through the stuff that she is doing. And so that all of a sudden leads to have kind of Sydney like kind of giving her friend crap because she has never really done anything in her life. And so now Sydney is just like, yeah, you're definitely always going to be a watcher. You're never going to be a person that's going to perform any of this because like you're never a person that is to ever take risks, which pushes this girl to have taken photos of people throughout their entire lives to decide that she wants to now go and be a person who takes risks, a person who is to be a player instead of a watcher. And so all of a sudden we have her doing little tasks here and there that the game is to just dare her to do. Like, so this is basically like a truth or dare movie, but it's like through an app of a system, which is just goofy. So this character is to eventually start to do these tasks, which bizarrely lead her coincidentally to be tied to a man named Ian, who is Dave Franco's character, and that eventually leads them on quite a few adventures, which eventually also leads them to eventually like have Ian actually tell V the truth about this game, which I kind of find is like really and truly fascinating. How this game is going to push you to absurd levels so that way you can win. And if you're not going to win, you're going to end up being a prisoner of the game and you're never going to get out. Like the only way that you're probably going to get out is if you die. So that just pushes these characters to eventually realize that no one is going to make it out of here alive. And so, really, at the very last part of this game, we really have it where it's just like killed or kill or be killed kind of thing. So, but yeah, so kind of a very interesting like climax of this movie. A lot of fun things going on in this film up until like the very end where it's just like, yeah, they kind of ran out of stuff to do. Like, because eventually it just becomes like all these kind of random dares, or it eventually starts to become like this dangerous part of this movie to where it's just gonna just continue to add up that eventually this movie is just gonna become much more and more dangerous to lead to quite possibly some people's deaths, or some people getting arrested, or some people having to, excuse me, forcibly be out of this game. At some points in time, this movie like does like also remind me of the Shia LaBeouf movie Eagle Eye, where all of a sudden like everything is to be set up around these characters, because we have these characters called Watchers that are to basically be like people who just like, oh, okay, well, I'll just help this person, or I'll just take these things, or I'll just whatever, so that way I can like be a part of this game somehow or another. So, with that said, I think that's all I wanted to say about this in a very cryptic like sense, which I kind of teed up most of this movie. So if people have if people have heard this before, people have seen this before, hopefully they did enjoy it, because more than likely a lot of people might just be like, yeah, like that this game does sound does sound cool. Like when really looking at it, you have like people that go on YouTube and do all these like prank things and prank scenarios and all these uh like task like videos and stuff like that. So like all of this without the thing of death threatening them. Basically, a lot of YouTubers do the same familiar kind of thing, and but they eventually know when to stop. They eventually know to just like, wait a minute. But But yeah, so eventually a lot of the stuff that you see here is a lot of stuff that probably like a lot of people would do via YouTube with the exclusion of probably like almost doing a crime of sorts through this film. So with that said, I think it's about time to go out of our way to go into spoiler time about this movie. Let's go out of our way to say that we've seen this film and go out of our way to go into spoiler time. Spoiler time, it's about that time we just spoil this movie. So very beginning of this film, we have a girl who is to be a photographer. We end up having a story sometime later that evidently her brother died. Sure. Uh, I don't know how that is to help us invest in this character because we are already forcibly invested. So I don't get what was the sob story about this character. I don't know. So V is a person who is to consistently be like cyber Facebook whatever stalking of this one football star who I guess is to be let's say I think it's Wes. No, JP. There we go. I don't know. Whatever. Whatever the guy's name is, I don't really care. It's some football star. It doesn't really matter. So, this girl is after this guy, let's just say, because he's. Anyways, so V is to consistently take photos of this guy because he's part of the football team. We have Tommy who is making fun of V because, like, you know what? The yearbook people would probably just be upset if every single photo was being taken of this one guy, and like there is very small amount of variety. And so V is just like, well, it's not my fault that this guy is like a tied to the whole entire school. And it's like, I get it, but like, you don't need to like basically stalk over this guy and take a million photos of him. I don't care if you like him. You should have spoke up about him eventually. Like this is kind of like Peter Parker in like the Tobey Maguire like Spider-Man movie, where Peter is like taking photos of Mary Jane, but like it's just never gonna happen between these two characters. So uh, V is to eventually go and watch her friend Sydney, who is this cheerleader, go out of her way to basically flash her butt to everyone at this school. And everybody's like, woo, wow. And then we end up finding out that Sydney had done this to complete a dare. And so now she's like, yeah, like I have like so much popularity because I flashed my butt to everybody at this homecoming game, whatever. So eventually, sometime later, we have Sydney who is pushing V to be a watcher. Ridiculously enough, we find out that a watcher can't just do this for free. There's like some $20 fee just to watch somebody do anything. And I'm like, wow, like that. Like, I get probably exclusive content and really, but yeah, like $20 seems really steep. Like, you would think that, like this would be like $10. Like you could watch a whole library of like WWE, Netflix, and probably Amazon Prime with the one price of that one thing. But I guess it's like, but the content is so exclusive. Really, I could probably go out of my street and find somebody doing nerve somewhere in somewhere in the vicinity of like in this world if I were to step in it. So but anyways, so uh Sydney is pushing V to be a watcher because evidently V has just $20 to spare with the all the photos that she's doing. So so Sydney is to basically like mention to V how like she's always gonna be a watcher and never a player. And so that pushes V to just like, you know what, like I'm gonna be a player then. Like I'm sick of Sydney just like belittling me and like I'm always second fiddle to her. So you know what? Like I'm gonna play this game and maybe I'm gonna beat her at her own game. Like wouldn't that be hilarious? How long has she been doing this? So and that would probably be anybody of like YouTube that's all of a sudden just like, dude, I'm just gonna go and like immediately go into YouTube to win one video and get 1 million views and 1 million subscribers, and wow, like one video, wow. So that's probably a number of people because they get that lucky. So V is to decide that she's to become a player. So all of a sudden we have just Tom, who's basically her best friend, but is also kind of a leech to her. Like, this guy is just like, I guess, her conscience throughout this whole entire film. Where Tommy is just like, you shouldn't do this, V. You should, like, if anything, this might be illegal. And so the very first thing that this girl is to perform is to kiss a guy for 5 seconds. And so Tommy is holding this girl's phone to have evidence of this. Every single time, every one of these people have to have, like, cell phone proof of this person doing this act, which I'm like, okay, who would just let anybody, like, handle their phone and, like, let them just, like how, like, would they, like, if anything, we have one guy who's, like, kind of dancing around and whatever. You would have thought, like, he would have been having his phone, like, right there the whole entire time, but I guess it is what it is. So, like, there's a lot of convenience with this movie, but it is what it is. So V goes on and is to have to go and kiss a random guy in some diner for 5 seconds. And at first, V is to kiss some, like, some truck driver looking guy, but eventually he moves to all of a sudden have some guy named Ian, who is David Franco in this movie, reading a book about some lighthouse that he didn't even, like, decide to get himself. Somebody gave him this book and told him to sit here. So, because when V is to assert herself into this game, they basically know every single thing about this woman. Like, they probably know her social security number. They probably know everything, because they probably do. They know that her favorite, like, song is Wu-Tang Clan. They know her favorite book is The Lighthouse, I guess, and so on and so forth. So V is to make her way over to Ian, and so V is to mention, like, hey, you're reading The Lighthouse, that's my favorite book. And so Ian is like, oh, really? Like, I barely started this book. Like, could you tell me how it ends? Like, maybe don't tell me. Wait, tell me. Don't, maybe, no, just tell me a little bit of it. Just tell me a snippet. Just tell me anything. And so V kind of breaks down that eventually these people are to see, or to get to the lighthouse in the end. But they end up finding out that the lighthouse is much more than just a lighthouse. It's much more than that. So Ian is like, great, super califragilisticexpialidocious. So V goes on and kisses Ian for 5 seconds. Tommy is to record it, and he's just like, magnificent, you did it, great. Like, come back over here, because I don't want you to be smooching that guy, because who knows, he could have the bad mouth disease. He could. Maybe he has jaundice. I don't know. Anyway, so V goes back to her, like, seat away from this guy, and she's like, I can't believe I just did that. Like, but I did the dare, and great. Now a lot of people like, immediately once this girl does this, immediately there's a ton of people that are all of a sudden viewing her thing, because if she's an attractive woman kissing an attractive man, I'm sure that would just, like, hey, she's doing a kissing dare, so yeah, like, everybody, like, go onto her channel, because whatever. So that all of a sudden leads us to all of a sudden having Ian just singing and dancing to this one song via this diner. And so, like, V is just like, oh my god, is this guy singing especially for me? And really, it's just like, no, he's just doing a dare. So Ian is to just put on this performance because he honestly has to, because he's been a part of this game before. And so technically he's basically forced to do everything the game is to tell him. So Ian puts on this performance to make his way back to V's table. And so then he starts talking to V, and eventually what ends up happening is that both the game wants to both team up both V and Ian together. And so here's the weird thing. So all of a sudden we have V's mother, who is Nancy, who is to all of a sudden start to see like deposits being put into V's bank. And so like she's like questioning this. She's like, wait a minute, like how is all of a sudden money going into my account? And there's quite a substantial amount of money being deposited into here. Like, I need to figure out why that this is going on. And so all of a sudden, like Nancy is trying to call Eve, and like Eve isn't answering, to the point of Nancy just going and calling Tommy and saying like, "Hey, like V hasn't been answering my calls. Like, how is it that all of a sudden like we're getting money deposited in my account because I'm freaking nosy as." And so Tommy mentions that V is in some online poker thing and she's doing extremely well, because that's actually a really smart, intelligent thing to just like, yeah, like she's doing some online poker thing and she's doing extremely well. And so hopefully she won't lose all of your money or whatever. So like she's doing well, just leave her alone, you know? So it could be worse. It could be like Would You Rather, where a lot of the tasks are basically like, hey, how about you lose an eye? Or how about you just like have to forcibly kill someone? How about you do all those horrible tasks? Because you have to. So anyways, so both V and Ian are to go to the city. And so because V is just like, yeah, I don't know if I want to team up with him. But eventually she's like, you know what, like, I guess I'll go because he's good looking, whatever. But like V is also to mention that it's like, well, Sydney, my friend, also plays this game, and she's like a much more popular person than I am. So more than likely, you should probably team up with her. And Ian's like, well, the game wants me to team up with you, so that's what we're doing. So Eve is just like, okay, like I'll go with you. So she goes out with him to the city, and so both of them are having to forcibly go to this store. And like we have us, unbeknownst to us, that Ian is kind of playing the game much more than Eve is. But we won't really realize that until V eventually confronts Ian about this. So, V is to make her way into this store because she has to try on a very specific dress. This dress doesn't look exactly as expensive as it probably should be, but neither does Ian's clothes. So, what ends up happening is that these two people are to try on these lavish outfits, and so Ian is to give V some pair of shoes that are to be really expensive. And so now we have Machine Gun Kelly coming through here, who is a guy named Ty, who is to go and steal both V's clothes and Ian's clothes. So Ty goes ahead and does that, and so when the two of them, because you can just wear clothes that you've like clothes that you've had in a fitting room, you can just wear them out in this store and no one will be the wiser, but whatever. And so we have these characters that go back to the fitting room realizing that everything is gone from theirs, like they don't have their wallets or whatever, they have nothing. And so the next dare that they are supposed to do is leave the store, and V is like, well, we're not going to be able to pay for these clothes. So if anything, it just did say that we could leave the store. It didn't say that we can leave with these clothes. So they end up wearing their underwear, boxers, and bras and panties. And so they basically run out of this store, go into this elevator, and make their way out of this building to eventually, when they go back to the motorcycle, they find out that basically all of their stuff, clothes, and whatever, as well as these new fancy clothes, someone had one of the watchers with a really expensive credit card had just bought these things for these people, and like we have people that are just watching on as they are to do this. So pushing on, so we have these two continue to go on and uh, like spend time together, but then uh, they continue to have to like go from these spot to spot places, and so one of the next tasks that we see here is to eventually make it through a part of town by having to one go 60 miles an hour and two have to do it blindfolded, whoever the driver is. So we have Ty who arrives with some sticker to slap onto Ian's motorcycle helmet. And here's the thing: if you were to slap a bumper sticker on someone's like helmet, I don't think that they would be able to see after that. You'd probably have to like really clean that thing down. And whichever, like, there was probably numerous helmets that they probably used during this film, and like I'm sure the bumper sticker one was probably one of them. Plus, also, I'm sure that the bumper sticker was cut perfectly to where Ian could actually see during all of this, because I couldn't assume that like they didn't easily be able to have this guy see through this thing, because like someone would have been dead. Uh, so and plus this is a long stretch of road and whatever. So, but I'm sure they just blindfolded him the whole entire way, right? So hilariously. So V is just like, yeah, I don't know if I can do this, and Ian is like, come on, like if anything, like I trust you, ba 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 ba. So conveniently, like Ian is driving like perfectly around all of these cars, even at points when there's obviously points when he shouldn't be able to see exactly where these cars are, and V is not giving him perfect instructions for everything, but like he conveniently squeaks through these two cars blindfolded, which there is no way that he should be able to do this, but he's doing it anyways. And like that is just way too much of a convenience where you have to admit that there's no way that this guy is doing this blindfolded. But like this guy perfectly swerves through all these cars and whatever with again telling him very little bits of instruction. Maybe every once in a while she's grabbing the motorcycle at some points and just kind of like positioning things. But yeah, so anyways, we get where V is to kind of tell him to like accelerate and whatever. So they, of course, do eventually get to the 60-mile-an-hour mark, and but eventually there is a really difficult time for them to be able to stop. But again, that leads us to have these two characters both like kissing and whatever because they're just in love. So this eventually leads both these characters to go to this carousel where they're to have this moment together to talk. I'm assuming this carousel thing is probably another dare that Ian was given. And so we eventually have V talking to Ian about her friend Sydney and how Sydney is just kind of like this kind of attention seeking kind of friend and whatever, and how uh like she starts talking smack about her, which eventually Sydney could easily see this because like everyone is watching like this couple this whole entire time, and so eventually someone will catch this somewhere, and of course they did, and so Sydney will be able to have or see Sydney like being talked about by her friend, and so uh but eventually Ian is like, well, hey, how about you go to that party that all of your friends are at, and like how about you just kind of like just go to this party and have fun, like if anything, like evidently like we should probably do something fun, right? So V is like, you know what, like I don't know, and but so V is just like, okay, let's go to this party because I think Ian had another dare. So Sydney is to tell people like, hey, like I want a real dare. Give me something that is going to be really, really scary. Like, give me something like I really want to earn the people that are viewing and whatever on this thing, this whatever the nerve. So what ends up happening is there's a ladder that all of a sudden gets to be put through to this party. And so all of a sudden now Sydney has to go on and walk like from one window to the other of two buildings via this ladder, and then there's a huge drop down. And so this girl has to walk all the way through every step of this ladder, and I'm like, good God, there is so many parts of this movie where like there is like this freaking out of a moment where you're just like, God, that is so high. Like, God, why do they have to show that so far up kind of thing? Like, good God, this movie is awful when it comes down to like, yeah, camera angles, and we're going to show how high this is. So Sydney has to, one, she has to record this via her phone, but she has a hard problem doing that and balancing. And plus, also, Sydney is to have to make it through window to window fairly quickly, and so she has to walk the entire way. So eventually, Sydney, who is already probably pretty blitzed or pretty drunk or whatever, she is to start walking, and then she's like, whoa, like she doesn't have the balance, and she also doesn't have the shoes to do this either. So she probably should have done this barefoot or something. So Sydney is to make it almost like halfway there, and eventually she like holds too much of the ladder, or she almost like slips and falls, and like falling onto the ladder kind of thing. And so basically she doesn't end up making the task, and so she is to bail out, which basically means that her time in this game is pretty much over. So we end up having Sydney, who I guess is just like upset that she's out of this game, decides that she's going to go and sleep with V's supposed boyfriend that Sydney had tried to ask out for V earlier in this movie. And this guy is just like, I'm not interested. She's not my type. But evidently, we find out what this guy's type is later on when Sydney is doing some motion and commotion of this bedroom. So V and Eden are coincidentally going to be able to open this door to find both V's past love and Sydney just banging away or whatever they're doing. And so V is like, oh yeah, of course, like you would do something like this because because you're just an attention grabbing woman. Like all you just want to do is just try to like get the best of her, who is V, and ba 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 ba. So anyways, and like Sydney is throwing in V's face all the stuff that uh that V had said through the Watcher cam. So eventually we have Tommy, who is to find out more stuff about Ian, finding out that Ian had played this game once before, and he had been on this crane where he had to hold his body up for quite a few minutes, or be the last one left to live, basically. And one guy had died, and both of these guys had bailed afterwards, and they just became a prisoner because of their failing task. So Tommy is to eventually tell V that hey, like this guy's really playing the game and he's played this before and people have died, and like, hey, like this guy is not who you think he is. So V is now confronting Ian about like, well, hey, like, are you still like playing the game? Like all the stuff that you're doing, like, is this really just you wanting me to do all this stuff, or is the game telling you to? And Ian is just like, well, technically the game is telling me to because I'm a prisoner of the game. I'm forced to do any number of these things because I'm a prisoner of the game. Like I have to try to figure out a way of how to get the heck out of this game because it won't let me go. Like it won't like it'll just tell me to keep doing this game and like I have no say in it because like he ended up failing once before. So V is just like, well, okay, but like so Ian is to mention that he's gonna try and throw the next challenge so that way V can be in the finals of this game. Because there are very few people that have gone and done dares or tasks or whatever that have gotten them arrested or they've bailed out on them or they've like gotten injured during these tasks and so all of them had bailed out. So what ends up happening is Ty goes to Sydney, and before she is to go and get a bailout, Ty is to ask Sydney, "Hey, how about you and me team up together?" Because it seems like like you're popular and I'm popular, and it seems like it's working really well for V and Ian. But eventually, once Sydney ends up like not doing well, like Ty is basically on his own. But uh, eventually Ty will get a call from Sydney later on in this film. So uh, so let's push on here. So eventually we get to the finals of this all. Because Ian is to go and hang on a bridge for 5 seconds with one hand, and he ends up beating that challenge because if he wasn't, he was going to die. So, like, I guess, like, he could have thrown that challenge by not going through with it, but. Anyways, so. This pushes us to have all these people meet for the finals. And so every single one of these people, like all of their tasks are to basically just get a gun and a ski mask and like go to this one location. And so they end up taking these things from these watchers. Also Ty had to go like completely underneath a train and have the train go over him during this one part of a train. And so we just have Ty who is just like sitting like or like laying like in this railroad track of a thing and have this train go over him. And I thought that was like the craziest thing in this movie because I'm like, man, that guy has to be like really skinny or special effects, obviously. But anyways, uh, so that leads us to having only three left. So we have Ty, we have V, and we have Ian left, and they're in the finals. They go to this one spot, and so basically, what ends up happening first is supposedly V and Ian are supposed to shoot one another, and Ian is just like, well, okay, then just shoot me in the shoulder, or just shoot me somewhere like that I won't die. Like, if anything, it doesn't seem like there's a certain set of rules, so like it could have just been shot in the hand, like you could have just been shot in the leg. Like it didn't seem like they specified like that you could only do certain things. I don't get why he had to be shot in the shoulder or whatever. Like he could have just been shot in the hand, and that would have been fine. But anyways, so V is to want to pull the trigger on Ian, but instead she fires off to the side. And so, like, basically the task is a bust. And so Ty is just now like, well, hey, man, like, I'll shoot V, like, I'll do it, and, like, say yes on the dare so that way I can go and shoot this woman. And so everyone is voting yes, and, like, some people are voting no. Here's also the thing we have Tommy and this girl who is uh, this hacker queen, and like Tommy is like getting a lot of information like from this girl, and but he's also to go on to have this girl, this hacker queen, kind of hack through this system and do any number of kinds of things. And so eventually that leads also to to have uh, this Tommy guy going through this black market of places to see any number of things like blank bullets or like body armor or nuclear weapons, probably. So, and so here's what happens. So, Ty is to eventually have this no yes thing going on, and a lot of V's friends who like Liv are trying to tell people like say no, we don't want her to die. So this leads us eventually to the tallies are up, and so everyone wants to say yes, and so Ty goes and shoots V, and now V's dead. Ian is comforting V in his arms, and so we find out that Ty is the winner of this game. What does he get? I don't know. But shortly thereafter that, like the whole game goes crashing down, and I guess they can no longer do this V thing anymore. It seems that Hacker Queen had figured out a way to get every single bit of money that this game had taken from V and Nancy to give it back to them. And so, like, but V is supposedly still to be dead. All of a sudden, we see that V is awake and she is alive. I'm like, oh, okay, so this is kind of Death Race all over again, where it's a trick, it's a swerve, it's a whatever. Because we find out that Ty's gun had blank bullets in it, and Ty had mentioned that he didn't want to kill anybody, but, like, Sydney had called him to put blanks in this guy's gun to where like someone will win this and it'll be Ty, and so that way like this game will be done, this game will be finished, and no one would be the wiser because technically all that this guy had to do was shoot somebody. The game didn't know that the bullets were blanks. So here's also the thing. We have the hacker queen who hacked through the system, and everyone that was to say yes to shoot V, like the hacker queen hacked into everyone that said yes and to say like you're a murderer, goodbye. Like, so that was kind of interesting. So, but yeah, so they tricked this game, and so nobody actually dies in the end, and so everyone walks off basically a winner because this game is no more until they probably do a sequel. Because I'm sure there's going to be setting up franchises of Nerve, New York, or LA, or Kentucky, or whatever, to keep this game alive some way or another. But yeah, so that's just the way this movie just fizzles out and finishes up. Eventually leading both Ian and V to be a couple, and seemingly having Tommy and Sydney maybe ending up as a couple as well, and then maybe Ty just going off to just be like, dude, I have so much money, I don't give a shit. Like, I won this game. Money, money, me. Yeah, great. Like, going off to marry Megan Fox probably at some point, if not someone else, because who knows. So with that said, I'm going to get out of here. Like, I think I covered most of this movie. There might have been some details that I rushed about, but without it, I'm going to get the heck out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Oh, V also did the same ladder thing that Sydney did, and she basically just conquered the whole thing. And, like, I guess that was another dare that she was supposed to do that I forgot about. So, yeah, I think I covered everything. If not, then it is what it is. I'm going to get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody.